Dustin Johnson looked like he was going to cruise in the final round of the WGC HSBC and in another World Golf Championship win. But Dustin, as well as many of the other contenders, flopped in the final round, with the exception of Justin Rose, who finally gets back in the winner's circle, which we haven't seen since the Olympics. We'll recap what happened last week on the PGA Tour. We'll preview this week's event, the Shriners Hospital for Children Open, and much more. That's Prime Sports Golf, brought to you by Pro Golf Weekly on Prime Sports Network, starts now. All right, it's Wednesday. Excuse me. Yeah, it is Wednesday, November 1st, 2017. I'm your host, Greg DePalma, and we've got a few more weeks to go before the end of 2017. That doesn't mean it's the end of the 2018 season, though. That's just getting underway, and the big event of the first part of the season is in the books as Justin Rose gets a win, a much-needed win for him, and we'll find out exactly what that does for his season and for the 2018 calendar year for a former and, a very dominant player at one time, and maybe he'll be dominant again, a former major winner. So could be a really big year for Justin Rose. We'll see whether or not he can go ahead and duplicate what we've seen over the last few years from a lot of these other really top talented players. But still a long way to go before we determine that. Let's talk about the Shriners Hospital for Children Open this week. And let's first introduce my co-host of the show, Jeff Shane. You can find his by the way, Jeff, is it still First Look?
Yeah.
Okay, I saw storylines this week, and I didn't know whether or not it was still
They've
First Look.
changed the headline, but not the title, as far as I know.
Okay. All right. Anyway, that's Jeff, and you can check out his First Look reports at PGAtour.com every Friday. So that is already up and available, as it has been for the past 6 days, at PGAtour.com. And also Joel Cook from ProGolfWeekly.com joining us. And Joel, did you happen to stay up, or I'm sure you watched it? Did you DVR it? How'd you finish watching the WGC event?
Well, I didn't think I needed to get up early for it. I did have a DVR. I had to go back when I saw, I turned on my phone and saw that Rose had won it. Like everyone else, I thought it was a foregone conclusion. I know DJs, had trouble closing in some events before, but not a lot of people could have seen that coming. So I had to get back on there and look at it. And Rose looked really good down the stretch there, in those conditions. It seemed like it was him winning it, just a little bit less than DJ losing it.
Yeah, you would normally do think that in those circumstances, when a lot of players are struggling with the conditions, that you're going to find at least one player that is going to have a good round. The question is that player that's having a good round going to be close enough to the leader? Not to say that he was close enough, because he was pretty far back. But under those conditions, like you said, Joel, he played even better than we could have expected, with some really big shots. And do you think that, as we talked last week and previewed this event, do you think because of the conditions, the way that they were in the final round, that it neutralized a lot of those big hitters like Dustin Johnson?
Maybe a little bit. I mean, even Rose with his great round, he still had 3 bogeys on that front 9, which makes it even more amazing that he came from 8 shots back. But it didn't seem to minimize for Jason Day or Phil Mickelson. They both were able to go pretty low. Some people seem to have that effect on. I'm not really sure what happened with DJ there. Maybe it's just from not having played much recently. But yeah, he just looked kind of lethargic in that last round.
I
didn't make things happen the way he was.
I was taken aback, Jeff, by the fact that this was one of the biggest comebacks ever. Because we've seen a lot of comebacks the last couple of years. We've seen players, go into the final round with these big leads and blow it. But wow, I mean, I was kind of surprised that this was that monumental of a comeback, and especially big event, that kind of thing. Great player. So that threw me a little bit, but that just shows you still never know about the game.
You never know, and there have now been 3 times where a 54-hole lead of 6 shots has been frittered away, and two of them have come in big events. One of the others, the most memorable 6-shot blown lead, of course, is the 1996 Masters, with Greg Norman, crumbled up against Nick Faldo. And so I think maybe the bigger stage can contribute to that. If the snowball starts rolling and starts rolling fast, it's a little bit harder to turn it around because of the pressure, because of the conditions, because of the setup. And so, in that sense, maybe it didn't surprise me. Dustin Johnson, just was out of sorts, and you could see it from the beginning. He bogeyed number 1. He was completely wayward at number 2, and now the ball's rolling downhill. And, with DJ, you thought maybe he'd kicked it a little bit, in terms of not letting a bad round become a horrible round.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes, and we certainly, he's not the only one. Sometimes guys just can't find the key for the day to turn it around, and I think that's what we saw with Dustin Johnson. And then in the blustery conditions, if you're wayward off the tee, that's where you're going to get hurt, and that's where it hurt Dustin Johnson. You mentioned there were others that struggled as well. You had to hit fairways on Sunday. DJ didn't.
Yeah, and nobody in the top 10 besides Justin Rose had a round in the 60s in the final round. So that just shows you what they were dealing with out there. But big difference, because all Dustin Johnson had to do was kind of struggle like Brooks Koepka, and he would have been fine. But he struggled and throw into the fact that he had to deal with the conditions. Now, I don't know. I mean, the announcers were making a case for the possibility, Joel, that this could be an issue for Dustin moving forward. That never entered my mind. I think this is a completely different person. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe their worries will be spot on. We'll see, but I don't see that. I'm not getting that from this player, especially Dustin Johnson. We've seen him so many times before, especially the years leading up to his great year, have these types of issues time and time again. And it just he was able to get through all that. I think if he was able to get through that and become the champion he is now, I don't see how it's going to bother him at this point.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. That he's gone through much worse than this. I mean, this is disappointing, but I don't think it'll do a ton going forward. It's easy to kind of have give him a perception as being a bit of a difficult closer or a choker or something like that. But I mean, the reason he seems to have he seems to squander so many big leads is because he gets into the lead so much more often than everyone else. He's bounced back well from these before. He had 3 great rounds despite having not played in quite a while. The last one's disappointing, but this isn't going to do anything for him going forward. He'll still be the number 1 for a pretty good amount of time still.
All right. So
Thomas catches him.
Also last week, of course, there was the Sanderson Farms, so that was the alternate event. Not a big field. We talked about that, but Chesson Hadley looked like he was in contention once again, and he's had an incredible run now, starting a new PGA Tour career. But it was Ryan Armour who played even better over the course of the week. Hadley played well, but Armour just played a little bit better, Jeff. What do we know about Ryan Armour?
He's a journeyman. This is Ryan Armour's first PGA Tour win. He's been on tour for, I believe this is the start of his 5th PGA Tour season. He's kicked around the web.com quite a bit as well. As I say, he's 41. This was his 105th PGA Tour start. So just one of those guys that has hung around and maybe been one of those guys that has had 1 foot in the PGA Tour, 1 foot in the web.com tour, shuttled back and forth. But he found the winning key last week. Took I believe it was a 3-shot lead into the final round, was playing really well, and he played well in the web.com finals, and managed to pull away. So, one of those guys that is finding his game at a late age. we've seen his name before if you've looked, kind of further down the leaderboard, but this is really kind of the first year where we've seen him higher and later on leaderboards.
So this is one of those big weeks by a player. No indication that he was going to play anywhere like this, and no indication that this is going to do anything crazy for his career.
No, he's not a young gun by any stretch of the imagination. He's, like I say, he's kicked around those tours for a long time. And, entering the Sanderson Farms, he was ranked number 321 in the world. He's now cut that in half pretty much. He's now ranked number 156, which I have to imagine is the highest ranking he's had ever. He's just been one of those guys that's made a very good living playing golf, but until we see some more, perhaps when the new season rolls around, he's going to be one of those guys that makes a kind of nice living playing the PGA Tour, and with the win, he's going to get a 2-year exemption, so that buys him 2 more years. Maybe he can find himself, a groove without that pressure of having to keep the card every year. Sometimes that can be as overwhelming as anything.
All right, Joel, I'm going to give you just one guess. Just one.
Okay.
All right. Who won last week on the PGA Tour Champions event?
That was last weekend.
Yeah.
Was Daly healthy? I don't. Probably that longer guy.
You think?
Daly wasn't healthy. Yeah. His putting is just out of. I mean, no one on any tour is putting the way he is right now. It's incredible. The clinic he's putting on at 60.
Is there what? I mean, when you're watching these events now, what else is there to talk about, Jeff? This is like Tiger Woods-esque for this tour.
Well, it really is, and what's amazing is that most tour players start to crest and then come downhill about 57, 58. Longer is 2 years beyond that. He just turned 60, and he is as dominant as he's ever been. I think we talked about it last week as well. He had never won 6 Champions events in a single season, even though he's won 4 Schwab Cups. He'd never won 6 events in a single season until last week. Well, now he's won 7 events in a single season. He is poised to perhaps sweep the Charles Schwab Cup playoffs because there's only one event left next week in Phoenix. Right now it's a stunning run. I would imagine as good as we've ever seen on the Champions Tour, considering the quality of the depth of the field. Now, there still seems to be a gap between Longer and everybody else, but you go back and we saw Hale Irwin dominate for a number of years. But I don't think the tour was as deep then. We saw Chichi Rodriguez dominate for a couple of years. The tour was definitely not as deep then. Longer just keeps getting better and better. Perhaps he should get his PGA Tour exemption back. Play a few more of those events.
All right. Before we talk about what's going on this week on the PGA Tour news regarding Tiger Woods. So I'm going to give you you're going to have an opportunity one way or another. I'll put the odds at 50-50 here. Joel, which side are you going to take? That Tiger Woods, even though he says will play at the Heroes World Challenge, will actually play?
I've been burned by this a few times the last few years, but I mean I want to say yes. He's I think it's big that he's showing those videos. He's usually pretty private and doesn't do that kind of thing. It seems like he genuinely wants to play. It's an unofficial event, so that helps that the expectations are low, and he can't finish worse than 18th. I think, looking at everything, this is a good starting tournament. I think it's better. He preferred, even if his mental game isn't completely there yet, I think he'd rather have his start here than something like Torrey Pines or Augusta in the spring.
Well, I guess the big question really, Jeff, is whether or not his body will allow him to play. And if his body even does allow him to tee it up in the beginning, will he be able to get through it? I mean, he did last year. So maybe it's not that event that we have to worry about. It's what happens maybe the next month following.
Yeah, it's what happens when you get into the week-to-week of it. I think Woods has been very good about following doctor's orders and and working his way up into it. He's now starting to play regular rounds at Medalist down in South Florida. There's been a lot of reports of him. He was not seen at Medalist at all during the summer when he couldn't swing a club at all, doctor's orders. But now he seems to be out there on a regular basis. He's putting in regular rounds. So the physical part of playing golf, I think, is coming along, and I think there's no question he's going to tee it up in the Bahamas. This is the blueprint for him. Same, as you mentioned, same thing last year. Came back from a 15-month layoff at the Bahamas, no gallery hardly, teeing it up with a very small group of people that like and respect him. 2 years ago or 2 years before that, same thing, came back from injury, teed it up at the Hero World Challenge when it was in Orlando, went into a full season after that. So this is the blueprint and the measuring stick for him. And whatever he does, good, bad, indifferent, and probably a little bit of everything, will be his barometer for things he needs to work on going into January, where his next event will probably be Torrey Pines. The mistake he made last year, and we talked about this, was that he went from Torrey Pines and flew halfway around the world to Dubai with a questionable back. And that wound up ruining all of 2017 for him. So it'll be interesting to me to see how he sets up his schedule for 2017 so that he doesn't bite off more than he can chew, because even though his back is now surgically repaired, it's also had to be fused.
Yep. And look, the sport, even though it's doing just fine without him, and look, he's the reason why we have the sport where it is. So let's not forget that, nor will we. But it would just be even that much more exciting if he can get back and not have these types of injury situations moving. I mean, it's these extended layoffs. It would be great to see him, because he's never going to be the player he once was, but he doesn't even have to be. As long as he is somewhere in the top, I don't know, he can be somewhere in the top 50, top 75, and that'll be good enough. Somebody that maybe wins once a year, that would be huge for the sport. Wouldn't you agree?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that if he can get into contention every so often, especially with these group of young'uns, if he can go into a Sunday, a couple shots off the Justin Thomas lead or 3 shots behind Jordan Spieth, and that would definitely build up some Sunday intrigue and interest, and in the spring when football's not a viewing option, I think that the television ratings would be boffo.
All right, so let's talk about this week's event, TPC at Summerlin, and Rod Pampling won for the first time in 8 years last year. So what do we know, first of all, Jeff, about this golf course? As you mentioned in your report at PGAtour.com, one of the things that you highlighted was a very interesting Final Four holes. What makes the Final Four holes interesting?
Well, it may be the most challenging part of the golf course. Kind of backing up a little bit, TPC Summerlin was ranked 40th out of 50 in terms of the toughest golf courses on the tour last year.
Wow.
And it's desert golf, and desert golf does not by nature have a lot of rough, and you're hitting in pretty thin air, and the challenge of the golf course will typically have to come from either your green complexes or the wind, and so that's what does that. And if you go a little bit deeper, there were only 2 courses on tour last year produced more birdies than TPC Summerlin. So something to keep in mind there. Last year's winning score by Rod Pampling was 20 under par, and that was the second highest winning score since the tournament went to playing TPC Summerlin all 4 days. So you're going to have to you have to go low every day. Pampling shot no worse than 68 in his 4 days at TPC Summerlin last year. So you have to be able to do that. Now, going back to that closing stretch, like I say, it's the most interesting part of the course and probably the most challenging, because you've got a drivable par 4, which is high risk, high reward at number 15. Number 16 is an eagle possibility. So it's a par 5 16th, and 17 is where you could give something back because the 17th is fraught with water. It's a par 3, and then a very strong closing par 4. So that's kind of where the challenge is, but you need the first 14, 15 holes. You've got to go out and get it, and you got to keep the pedal down.
All right. What about you, Joel? You have any memories, anything about this particular golf course that you wish to share with us today?
I mean, not a lot of recent. I mean, I liked when Timberlake was hosting it. Personally, he's one of the coolest celebrity golf fans out there. But I mean, the Rod Pampling story last year was incredible. He was just in such awful form going into it, and I think it's great that he was able to get that 2+ year exemption so they could pretty much not have to worry about his status anymore. Ride this until he gets to the Champions Tour in a few years. There's been some quality winners in recent years. A lot more steady guys, not necessarily ones who you normally see binging on birdies, but they play well here and then find their way around, like the Ryan Moore and Wes Simpson types.
Okay.
Remember, too, that Rod Pampling was not supposed to play that tournament last year.
That's true.
There was a clerical error in PGA Tour headquarters that forgot to adjust the field size from 144 down to 132, which is what it usually is. And I don't know how you go about that, but somebody didn't flip that switch. And so when the official field came out, it had 144 guys in it. And by that time, you can't tell guys, sorry, we can't let you play. So Rod Pampling was in that 12 that would not have been there if not for the clerical error. And he hit the jackpot.
So no clerical errors that you know of yet that we can, is that a trend?
I
no?
Checked. It's 132 this week. I think it was just a one-time mistake back at Tour headquarters.
Okay. All right. So let's get to it. Jeff, you have the first pick this week?
Actually, Joel has the first.
Joel, you have the first pick this week.
Yes, and I think I needed after her last week. I thought I did real good getting Leishman and Rahm and Fisher, and they were just all terrible. Just one of those weeks, I guess. How
does it feel to be trailing, Joel? How does that feel?
It feels odd. I mean, I don't know. I'm trying to still combine it in my head with the weeks from the end of last season to make myself feel a little better. But last week was tough to take. I don't know where that round from Leishman came out of, where he just didn't look anything like he did the previous week.
Well, get used
you
to...
think last week was tough to take?
Yeah.
I had DJ.
See,
yeah, that's true. That's true. And someone else benefited from that, taking Rose with their second pick, I believe.
Someone did. Yes.
Yeah.
So at least we got a win. But that's all that matters. So let's get another win. And let's go ahead and, yeah, I guess that's what they always say. People always wonder, is it better to get blown out like Joel or to lose the way Jeff lost? So usually it's better to get blown out. I think, Jeff, you would agree with that?
Yeah, you can tear up your card early. That's usually a little easier on the psyche.
No expectations. All right, so let's go ahead and Joel, you get the first pick. The favorites here are Tony Finau. Your boy Finau is a co-favorite with Webb Simpson, the 2013 champ. Then we've got Patrick Cantlay at 20-1. Chesson Hadley and Charlie Hoffman at 25-1. So those are the top players here. Again, not a big board. We're not surprised about that at this time of year. By the way, before Joel gives his pick, is there anything, Jeff, as far as any trends at all? I know you like throwing in sometimes about first-time winners or anything like that. Any of those types of trends as far as, especially with these events at this time of year, you get some of those 8 of the last 10 winning their first ever PGA Tour event or anything crazy like that?
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. Las Vegas is a perfect haven for somebody to strike their first PGA Tour victory. 10 of the last 15 winners in Las Vegas have made it their first PGA Tour win. Preceding Pampling was Smiley Kaufman, and the name just escapes me on who won the year before
Ben
that.
Martin.
But there were, Ben Martin was the. Those were both first-time winners, and actually Las Vegas had a stretch toward the end of last decade where they had 6 consecutive first-time winners. So,
okay.
And in a field like this, where there is not a single top 20 player in the field, it's wide open for some hot newcomer to take a shot.
All right. So I'm not sure if that's going to sway Joel or not. So Joel, going with a first-time winner, or your boy Tony Finau, or something else?
It would be that first one he said. There's two players here that I think I'm pretty torn between. If I thought one of them had a chance of falling to my next pick, I'd pick the other one. But especially the guy I'm not picking here, I don't see him getting by Jeff. But I've noticed before, you guys are obliterating me in missed cuts. So I'm going to go and take the guy who's never missed a cut as a professional, Patrick Cantlay at 20 to 1. Everyone knows he's going to win soon. He's going to win soon. And this is as good a place as any for. His form's been great. He was great in the FedEx Cup playoffs, tied 15th last year, 10th strokes gained off the tee last year. Everything looks good for him for this to be his week.
Yeah, Cantlay is a can't not play. And 7 top 20s in 13 events. That's tremendous. He's definitely, and now that he's healthy, and it's good to see, we know that the talent is there. So he's the next really good young player to keep an eye on. What's his ceiling, you think, Joel? How good can Cantlay be?
A regular Ryder Cup, player. Maybe small handful of majors, 3 to 5 maybe. I mean,
that's all.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, throwing off a little bit of that. But the upside is definitely very high. We saw when he first came and had that 60 at the Travelers and did well at the U.S. Open one year. Yeah, I mean, I think yeah.
So he's got top 10. Yeah, does he have top 10 potential?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Okay.
Definitely.
Jeff?
Yeah, he was absolutely on the fast track until the back injury, and the back injury robbed him of 3 years out of his career. And as long as he stays healthy, and I think I was looking at Cantlay as well. The only thing that kind of made me shied away is he's coming back from China, long travel, consecutive weeks. How's the back? When you sit on the plane that long, I can certainly understand picking him high. I'm not sure that I would have because of the other factors, but I have no argument with what he's done. I'm gonna. Yeah, go ahead, say again.
I was just saying, yeah, no, there aren't very many people in this field who were in China last week. I think a lot of them are, didn't want to have to play the very next week from going out there. I can understand that.
Yeah. So in that sense, thumbs up to Cantlay for making the effort. And he's a California guy, so this is a fairly close to home type situation for him. I'm going to go with the experienced hand and a former winner in Vegas, and he's got 3 top 5s in his 6 appearances, which has made him the number 2 all-time money winner in Las Vegas. And he's been playing well with top 20s in 5 of his last 6 starts. It's hard to ignore Webb Simpson.
Yeah, you've been grabbing Webb a bunch lately, so maybe it is his time, especially since he's playing well, and you just that's what you do. If players keep playing well and you keep picking them, you keep picking them.
Yeah, that was who I was talking about.
Okay.
I didn't think I was going to get past him.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and, you know what, I'll take the other favorite then. I'll take Tony Finau. Why not? I think it would be nuts to pass up on Finau with the 3rd pick. He's been playing exceptionally well, and a player that, again, Joel's picked an awful lot. So another player that, look, he just keeps playing well. You got to keep going with him. So Joel passed on him, and hopefully I'll make him regret that. And maybe this will be the week that he wins, and then I'll spike the football right in your face, Joel. So, so there you go. Tony Finau, the top pick at 16 to 1, and top pick for me. Okay, so the top 3 players on the board are all gone: Finau, Simpson, and Cantlay. So we'll start all over again, Joel. You've got Hadley and Hoffman at 25 to 1. Woodland, Moore, and Chappell at 28 to 1. Those are the next in line as far as the odds are concerned. Are you going to take any of those players, or do you have someone else in mind?
No, I'm going to go down a little bit further, and this wouldn't match the trend of first-time winners. But I mean, I think he's just the best player in the field, and sometimes that talent, really helps. This Bubba Watson at 35 to 1. I know he was expecting to be out longer than he has, but he hasn't played the last 2 months. He's still an elite player off the tees. I'm hoping in the last 2 months here he's been putting in the work to in that iron game that's usually good, but kind of failed him this year. And I think this is a good week for him to really get back on there. He's refreshed, and 35 to 1 odds for how good he usually is. I think this is a good week for him.
All right. Well, look, sometimes you make picks out of left field and actually do well. So we'll keep an eye on Bubba Watson because Bubba just has not been atop the leaderboard very often. But his 2017 season's behind him now, and maybe
he did get better at the end of the year. He was 10th at one of the I think the Dell Technologies, or no, it was the first one, Northern Trust. He started to come around a little bit.
Okay. Well, we'll see because 2017 wasn't good. So hopefully the 2018 season will be much better for Bubba, who's definitely in the prime of his career. Is he still playing with that goofy fluorescent ball?
I think
I'm
he
sure
quit
he's
that.
got a contract to do that.
Oh,
yeah.
okay. All right, Jeff, you're next. Webb Simpson was your first pick. Who are you taking number 2?
I'm going to stay with a hot hand and see if he can take it go low one more week and maybe turn this one into a win. But Chesson Hadley has 4 top 3s in his last 5 starts if you factor in the Web.com finals. And we know that he's a streaky player, so I'll make him my second pick.
Yeah, I actually thought you were going to make Hadley your first pick, to tell you the truth. So, and I was thinking it was either Finau or Hadley. But I decided to go with Finau. Yeah, Hadley is just too hot right now not to take as well. So, yeah, not a shock there that you should go with Hadley. And as we talked about, look, considering how well he played last season on the Web.com tour, if he can get off to a good start on the PGA Tour, he could have a really big year in 2018. So we'll see if he can take advantage of his hot streak right now. That's something I'm sure he really does want and need to do. All right, I'm going to go ahead and drop down the list. I'm going to go to, pun intended, Luke List at 40 to 1. Luke was 15th here last year, trending in the right direction, was real solid a few weeks ago when he finished 5th. And he's another guy that he's like one of those players that I think kind of fits this event. And he's not a Ryan Armour type. He's actually, starting to play better. He's had an interesting. He's coming off. I gotta believe, and I guess I have to just quickly check to see if it was, but I gotta believe last season was his best season. And it was he had a good 2012. That was actually statistically his best season, but I assume that was on the Web.com tour. And that's when he won once, runner-up 3 times, but at the PGA Tour level, that was clearly his best season, Jeff, wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. For the first time, we started seeing him, in that leaderboard mix, usually early in the week. I don't think there were that many that took him into Sunday with a chance, but the fact that we were seeing him on a more regular basis, absolutely best year that he has had thus far.
All right, Joel, you got Cantlay and Watson. Who is pick number 3?
Well, I was all over lists there, so that stung a little. But I'm gonna go with the guy I thought you were gonna take there. That's Kevin Chappell at 28 to 1.
Okay.
He's had a few weeks off here since the President's Cup. He finished the year well. Had 2 finishes tied for 6th at Northern Trust, 12th at BMW. He does pretty much everything well. So regardless of how the conditions go, he's someone I'd be confident in his.
It was actually, for me, it was actually between List and Chappell. So you were not far off. Definitely knowing me and my infinity for taking Kevin Chappell. So Chappell to me, it doesn't have a great resume at the course, but in this field, he's definitely one of the better players. So and for him to be 28 to 1 in this field is probably a pretty good play. Jeff, you've got Simpson and Hadley. Who's your third choice?
I've got it down between 2. I think I'm going to go with the local flavor for this one, and he's a former champion at this event a few years ago. And after kind of an off season, he was starting to come around a little bit with top 20s in his last 2 starts, and that's Ryan Moore.
Yeah, Ryan Moore, another guy that has to definitely be considered this week because he does play very well at this golf course, including the win in 2012. And he had the time off with the injury, but now he's starting to play a little bit more. And so this is about the time you take a guy that is starting to get into the groove. He's got back-to-back top 20s coming in here. So Ryan Moore definitely a solid play at 28-1. My third choice, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to drop down even further at 66-1 and take Scott Brown. Scott Brown seems to be trending in the right direction. Like List, he was fifth his last time out. And just a player that, we take, usually when we take him, it's this time of year. And I know it's probably somebody I could have waited the long shot category for. But there are a lot of other players that were kind of in the mix, and this isn't a great field, so I'll roll the dice with a couple more long shots earlier than normal. And if you're going to do that, this would be the week to do it. So Scott Brown at 66-1 is my third choice. All right, Joel, real long shot now. Any player 50-1 or more. And who you're going to go with? And by the way, the 50-1 shot on the line is Smiley Kaufman, the 2015 champ. Who's your long shot?
Well, the one I really liked this week was Scott Brown, who I was going to take there. But Greg's reading my mind today.
Oh, wow. Look at that.
Yeah, I think he's going to bounce back from he played in the last group of the CJ Cup. I think he's going to learn from that and bounce back. He's had a lot of good finishes this year. I don't normally picking this early in this one. I usually don't like to go longer odds, but there's just one I like too much. I was originally going to take this guy. I was hoping this guy would be my alternate with Brown the starter, so I'll take my alternate, my first one. I've taken him before in this thing. Andrew Landry, 90-1. He was great on the Web.com tour last year, had 2 victories over there, and this field is mostly players of the caliber that he played against last year. He's tied for 7th at the Safeway Open, and he's a phenomenal putter. That's always an equalizer in these kind of tournaments. I think his odds should be lower than that. I like him at 90-1.
Okay. Yeah, there's some of those players that are coming off the Web.com tour, players that we maybe are going to start to get used to this season. So I'll bring up a few others as we move along here. But Andrew Landry is one of them. So he's in there at 90-1. Jeff, your official long shot?
I'm going to take another streak player, well, you actually mentioned him because he's at the top of the long shot list, and that's Smiley Kaufman. 4th last week at the Sanderson Farms. That is his second best finish in 59 PGA Tour starts. His best finish, Vegas, 2 years ago.
So he likes this time of year. Apparently.
Seems to,
Yeah.
and perhaps the caliber of field is one where he can rise up the leaderboard.
All right. I'll tell you what, I'm going to take a player that is playing pretty well right now. He's going through a nice little run in his last 4 events, all top 25s. Ended his season strong in the Web.com tour. Began his PGAtour.com season with 25th place finish last week. So I'll go 80-1 Austin Cook. What do we know about Austin Cook, Jeff?
That is you've got me on that one.
Joel, what do we know about Austin Cook?
He's a pretty long hitter, isn't he? I looked him up, and then actually I had him written down on my thing, and then for some reason I deleted him. I'm trying to remember what soured me off of him. Yeah, he's another one of those.
Oh, you draw a line
guys.
through it? Oh, see, I got the camera sitting right on your desk, which is the reason I'm taking all your picks. I didn't realize you had a line drawn through it.
That would make sense.
Yeah. I want a new pick then.
I mean, he was good on the Web.com tour. He would fit the profile pretty well.
Okay.
25th last week at Sanderson Farms.
Yes, some of the other guys like Landry and Cook, we've got, let's see. We have, let me throw in some other names here. Well, we've already, I tell you what, we've mentioned a couple of these names before. Beau Hossler.
Yeah.
He's at 125-1. He was 10th last week, runner-up twice on the Web.com tour last season. and Maverick McNeely is going to be here. He's 200-1. That's a player that of course there's a lot of hope on as far as his talent, what he can do. Aaron Wise at 80-1 was 10th last week. And any other names or what about those guys that I just mentioned, Jeff, that people should keep an eye on, including of course Joel's long shot pick, Andrew Landry.
Yeah. Well, Landry was a guy that actually took a share of the lead into the final round of the U.S. Open 2 years ago when DJ won, and kind of parlayed that momentum into a pretty good season on the Web.com tour. Was one of the early graduates off the regular season money list, and so somebody that has come along pretty well. Beau Hossler, another one of those guys that we saw in his very young days, in his teenage days, play well at the U.S. Open, kind of like Patrick Cantlay, not quite the fast track that Cantlay has had, but he had 2 very good years at the University of Texas. He might be best known for having to sit out the NCAA final after blowing out his shoulder in the NCAA semifinal 2 years ago, and oddly enough, chose to turn pro coming off that injury. Did not go back to school. Played some mini tour, got into some Web.com events through Monday qualifying, and played well enough in the events to get the special temporary exemption, and graduated from the Web.com tour despite being way back in the field, so to speak. So his talent is there. You mentioned Aaron Wise. He helped Oregon to an NCAA title as their number 1 player a couple of years ago. So some guys that we have seen play very well on the collegiate level or in some of the major championships.
Okay. And what about, do we know much about Joel? Do we know much about Brandon Hagee?
He went through a little stretch. I was going to bring up Scott Strohmeyer. Everyone's been talking about him this week.
Why is that?
Crazy long hitter.
Okay.
Hagee's. I remember Hagee having a good streak for a while in the middle of the season, and then kind of taper off towards the end. I didn't really put too much thought into him.
Okay. All right. So we're through our top 3 picks in our long shots. So we've got our alternates now in case any of the players we mentioned do not tee it up tomorrow. So let's start with your first alternate, Joel, in case Cantlay or Watson or Chappell don't make it. So who are you going to go with?
They're talking about some wins. I'll throw a win guy out there. Martin Laird at 40-1. He's done well here before. Actually, he was tied 7th in total driving last year. He did really well in the fall series last year, and this is the time of year he likes playing in now and is comfortable. Yeah,
not only, he had the back-to-back playoffs here, winning in 2009, losing to Jonathan Bird in 2010. So
on that walk-off hole-in-one.
Yeah, so Laird really does like the golf course, and he is playing pretty decent. He's got a nice little stretch going, so definitely was on my alternate list. Jeff, what about you? By the way, the players that are still the top odds players still out there, Charlie Hoffman. We're all wondering when he's going to break through and win after a great season last season. Now, he hasn't made any cuts here over the last 3 years, but he does have a couple of top 10s on the golf course over his career. So he's 25-1. Gary Woodland is 28-1. I believe he's playing here for the first time. Then we go Benny On, Kevin Na. Kevin Na is the 2011 champ, runner-up here a couple of years ago. And Anaban Lahiri also, all 3 of those players at 33-1. We got Jamie Lovemark at 35-1. We got Kokrak at 40-1 and Kevin Streelman at 45-1. So those are the players that are those are the non-long shot players that are still on the board for you, Jeff, unless you want to take a long shot here.
No, he's close to a long shot, but I'm going to take Kevin Streelman at 45-1. He is a guy that lives in the desert in Phoenix, so kind of used to the conditions, has never missed a cut in Vegas, and he's gotten off to a decent start this year with a pair of top 15 finishes at the Safeway Open and last week in Mississippi.
Yeah, Streelman, like Laird, there were 3 guys that were on my alternate list, Laird, Streelman, and my alternate, which will be Jamie Lovemark. But yeah, Streelman is trending in the right direction. So he's starting to really pick things up. Again, he's got that runner-up here a few years ago. and he's got a bunch of top 25s here. So yeah, Streelman definitely looks like a solid alternate at 45 to 1. But I'm going to go with Lovemark at 35 to 1. He is, he's having, he's coming off really his best season if you take a look at it. He cracked the 100. Matter of fact, that's what he's been doing since really about 6 months ago, right around Memorial, or just before that. Actually, yeah, you got to go all the way back, actually, because he was inside the top 100 before that, back in 2016, but didn't end the season until 2016 at 100. But right now, he's at 79. So career-wise, this is definitely the best run that Jamie Lovemark has made over the past year and plus. So I guess the only thing that we need to see from Lovemark now is another win. He's got 2 professional wins, both on the Web.com tour, the last in 2013. Maybe he will fit into your first-time PGA Tour wins here at Shriners. Okay, Joel, your long shot. You've got Landry. So if Landry doesn't play tomorrow, who are you going to take instead?
I'll go with one of the hotter hands recently, Nick Taylor at 80 to 1. Last 3 starts, he's gone to T9, T13, T23. That's pretty good. He had some moments last season too where it seemed like he was close to really maybe taking one of these things.
Yeah, I've taken him a few times last season, and he had that win in 2014 at the Sanderson Farms. So another guy who likes it this time of year, maybe. And that was a big shock win for him, long shot kind of deal. But he actually peaked there after the win, and then he kind of disappeared. But he's playing much better in 2017, as you said. So this is definitely his best season. And if he keeps playing like this, maybe he'll get maybe be able to crack the top 100 soon enough. So yeah, Nick Taylor's a very good pick there, coming in here as a long shot at 80 to 1. Jeff, you've got your top long shot, Smiley Kaufman. So who's your backup?
My backup, I'm going local flavor again, and a guy who is starting to find his rhythm. Not consistent quite yet, but he is playing at home, so maybe that will help him out. Scott Piercy, we know what kind of talent he has, and obviously he'd love to win his hometown event, so I'll put him in the alternate slot.
All right, Scott Piercy at 66 to 1. Yeah, Scott Piercy likes playing here. He's got a whole bunch of top 25s here and a couple of top 10s. Okay, my final long shot. Let's see, I've got a few guys here that I am contemplating, but I will go with the talent. Another player that would just keep hoping he breaks through. I've taken him a bunch of times in this spot, and that is Patrick Rodgers at 90 to 1. So Patrick Rodgers will be my alternate long shot pick. He was 13th here a couple of years ago. Other players that I was considering in this spot were Patton Kizzire, who was runner-up here a couple of years ago. Maybe the 10th place finish last week gets him going. Seamus Power. Both Joel and I have taken Power recently. He was in contention last week, so maybe he could finish the job this week at 90 to 1. I was also thinking about Hostler because he was 10th last week, as we mentioned. So he's at 125 to 1. So those were the main long shots that I was considering, and everything else that I was thinking about as far as players, the regular category, were already off the board. So what about you, Jeff? Anybody else that was out there, either long shot or non-long shot, that you were close to taking?
I thought about Gary Woodland, perhaps in the non-long shot category, but just decided to go with a couple of hotter hands with Streelman and Moore, a couple of desert players, as opposed to Woodland, who is not, although he plays very well in Reno. We'll see how well he plays in Vegas.
Yeah.
And from the long shot category, thought about Aaron Wise. He's PGA Tour rookie. As I mentioned, he helped lead Oregon to the NCAA title. Only needed 1 year on the Web.com tour to graduate. I don't know if he's a top 10 player in the world eventually. I don't think his ceiling is as high as Patrick Cantlay, but he's a very talented player and a guy who is playing out west. So I think that probably benefits him as well. And I was also looking at Sean Stefani at 100 to 1.
Stefani.
Yeah.
Haven't talked about him in a while.
It's been a long time since we've mentioned his name, and he had to go down to the Web.com finals to get his card back, but he was runner-up at the Web.com Tour Championship, took a few weeks off, 10th last week in Mississippi.
Joel?
I was looking at Wise and Hoffler. Wise especially, I think, is going to win in the not-too-distant future. Another guy I almost took there at 66-1, David Lingmer.
Mm-hmm.
For some reason, I was under the impression that he was just terrible this past year, but this is probably because he didn't get near the top that often. But I was looking at him; he was a lot more consistent than I realized. A lot of finishes in the teens and 20s. He missed the cut at the Del Tech, but before that, he hadn't missed a cut since April, and he's a good one of the more talented players in the field.
No, yeah, I mean Lingmerth, he was there a few times, and he always does seem to get into these runs for a month or so where he plays really good golf. But the thing that, and I was actually thinking about him, but the reason that I stayed away from him was he doesn't ever play well here. I don't even know if he's ever made a cut here. So I was a little bit, that's what shied me away.
I think it's that same factor that keeps us from taking Charlie Hoffman, even though he's a Vegas guy.
That's true.
Summerlin doesn't agree with him.
That is true. I mean, he does have some success here, but it hasn't been recently. So maybe we're making a mistake by not taking Charlie Hoffman this week. We know how many times we took him last season. Just kept thinking he's going to break through. He's going to break through, and he didn't do it. So this is a good field for him to break through. So maybe we left a good one off the board. Okay, so next week is Mexico, Jeff?
The OHL Classic at Mayakoba, and that is where we saw the return of Pat Perez, coming back from shoulder surgery in the better part of a year off, and won in his third start back from shoulder surgery, and that proved to be a heck of a launching point because he played well for an entire season, which we had not seen in the longest time, and he's already won in this season, having won in Malaysia.
All right. And Joel, what's going on at Pro Golf Weekly? What's going on with you?
Thanks, Greg. Yes, please check out Pro Golf Weekly at progolfweekly.com, where you can get all the stats, videos, compelling analysis, key highlights, and the best in social media for every pro tour worldwide. We've really stepped up with the previews this week. We got the Turkish Airlines in Europe, the Japan Classic. We got in-depth information on all those. We also have an interesting article on here, 7 factoids about the Schmiers Hospital Open. It's got a pretty compelling past, and there's definitely some intrigue in that event. But again, that's progolfweekly.com, the best in social media, and their one-stop web portal for all pro golf tours worldwide. And please follow me at Joel J. Cook on Twitter for the latest updates, commentary, and much more. And tune in next week when we do this again.
All right, sounds good, Joel. So best of luck, enjoy the golf, and we will talk to you next week.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All right, that's Joel Cook, progolfweekly.com. And Jeff, as Joel was mentioning with the Turkish Open, the Turkish Airlines Open, this is a big event on the European Tour calendar. So this is when we get the luxury of the really early in the morning golf, and then the normal time golf, even though it's actually later in the day. So if you're an Eastern time person like we are, you're going to have a gap, in the late morning and early afternoon, but then you've got the late afternoon golf, and then especially for you, this should be perfect with you stay up till 4 a.m. all the time, so you'll be able to get the West Coast time zone on the PGA Tour, and then as soon as that's over, you can move on over to the Turkish Airlines Open.
'Tis true. The thing that kind of surprises me about this event is it is the first event of the 3 quote-unquote playoff events in the Race to Dubai. But despite it being a playoff event, there are 7 of the top 20 on the Race to Dubai points list that are not in Turkey this week. So that's kind of a strange anomaly. Now, we will get Justin Rose, and we will get Tommy Fleetwood, who is at the top of the list. And Henrik Stenson will be there. He's one of the favorites. He and Rose, I think, are co-favorites. But
yep.
I just found it odd that for something that is billed as the playoffs, you get one or two that miss the first playoff event on the PGA Tour. There are 7 of the top 20 that are not showing up. I find that fascinating.
And there's only 3 events.
Right.
Yeah, so that's something that they may have to figure out a way to try and get these players, try and force their hand, because I'm sure the people in Turkey aren't very happy. Look, there are some decent players there, but yeah, it is. This is what you would expect there in a playoff situation, to have over 50% of the key players there, and under 50% is a surprise. So maybe it's a point system that they can screw around with, or maybe it's just the time of year. There's nothing they can do about it.
It might be the time of year. For instance, we know Rory McIlroy has declared his season over so that he can get his rib injury rested up and get ready for the next season. And I think it's one of those things where typically going into that finale in Dubai, they don't reset points. If you're not in the top 2 or 3, you're not probably going to catch the number 1 player. So they may have to, go to some sort of drama infused reset of the points like the PGA Tour does. I'm not sure, but it's just a little bit different. Now, the people in Turkey, I'm sure, are not all that happy with the quality of the field not being what they thought it was going to be. But at the same time, they're getting worldwide television exposure, and we're talking about it, and it's being written about. So the ancillary things are still in place.
All right, and we look again. Next week should be this week should be a lot of fun. This is always, especially at this time of year when it is kind of hard to find golf. Especially, look, we had the World Golf last week, so we're now going to kind of be biding our time till January and so forth. But this is again, you do have some good players over in Europe, so that's cool. Got 2 events to watch and enjoy, and hopefully we'll have some drama as well in Vegas. So that's coming up this week on the PGA Tour and over in Europe. Now,
yeah, and the other tours will also be wrapping up here in the next 3 weeks. The Champions Tour, the PGA Champions finale, as we mentioned, is next week.
Yep.
Charles Schwab Cup Championship in Phoenix, where Bernhard Langer can do something else unprecedented and sweep the playoffs. And then the week after that will be the Race to Dubai finale in Dubai, and the LPGA finale down in South Florida.
All right. Don't forget to check out Jeff Shane's Around the Tours report on Prime Sports Network, where you can find many of the event info we discussed on today's show, not including stories like a shot clock at the Shot Clock Masters in Austria on the European Tour. So find out exactly what Jeff is talking about there. A little bit of a recap on Christy Kerr's 20th career LPGA victory, and the Colonial on the PGA Tour looking like they may be losing their sponsorship. So that's Jeff Shane's Around the Tours report at PrimeSportsNetwork.com. Don't forget to check out his First Look report at PGATour.com as well for next week's event on the PGA Tour in Mexico. So for Jeff Shane, I'm Greg DePalma. For Joel Cook, we will see you again next week right here on Prime Sports Golf on the Prime Sports Radio Network.